Welcome back for episode 16 of Free Thoughts from Freedom Chiropractic and Rehab. Thanks for joining us. This week's quote of the week is, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet," from Abraham Lincoln. Now, obviously it's a joke, right? We all know that Abraham Lincoln wasn't around when the internet was invented. But it's important for us to remember that we have to trust our sources, right? Just because it's written on the internet or posted as a video on the internet doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Let's talk about health. So this week we're going to talk about our sources, the sources of the information that we use to make decisions in our lives. There's tons of information out there, tons of information. We have to be discerning with choosing which information we place our trust in. This goes not just to the written word like we talked about in our quote, right? You can't believe everything you read on the internet. But we have to be careful with what we listen to. We have to be careful with what we watch, especially when it comes to our television news and those kinds of things, to make sure that we're getting the real information, not just getting propaganda. Now, this week I want to talk about an interview, right? So I listened to a 4-hour interview on a podcast from Andrew Huberman, and he interviewed Pavel Tsatsouline, who's widely credited as being the guy who brought kettlebells and introduced them to the United States. He introduced not just the kettlebell itself, but also the training methodology that he uses. That information has greatly influenced my personal strength and conditioning program, but also influences the strength and conditioning program of all the people who take our kettlebell classes, because we use the information that Pavel has shared over the years to kind of formulate the plan for what we do there. Now, Pavel works with younger athletes. He also works with older population like we do. We use that information because we want to give people the most effective training plan for them. So I have to go through all of the stuff that Pavel shares and figure out what's applicable, not just to me, but also to the people who are taking our kettlebell class. So as an example, there's lots of people in the kettlebell world who use the snatch as a great exercise, and it's a wonderful exercise, but it's not great for everyone. So we've taken the snatch out of our programming. I don't use the snatch. I've replaced it with a clean and press anytime I want to do a snatch movement. For those not familiar, the snatch is when you take that kettlebell from the floor and raise it all the way up over your head. The clean and press, we bring the kettlebell to the rack position in the middle before we press over our head. So there's a little step in between, but it allows the shoulder to get into a more stable position, so we're protecting ourselves. So we don't want to necessarily implement 100% of what Pavel says. I want to implement 80% of it. I want to use 50% of it, whatever it is that's appropriate for us and for our people in the kettlebell class. As another example of this, a great book, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I have referred to it several times in our newsletters over the years. If everything he says in that book is 100% true, we all need to change our sleep habits yesterday. The reality of it is, let's say that 50% of it is true, because he talks in that book about how sleep impacts cardiovascular health. He talks about how it affects our mental health, our physical health. It applies to so many different aspects of life. We all need to improve our sleep. But if only 30% of what he says is real in there, we all still need to improve our sleep. So he hits on a lot of different topics because it's going to apply to a lot of different people. But even if 30% of what he says in that book is true, we all need to change. We all need to change our habits. So these are sources that I've learned to trust over the years, right? You need to make sure that you can trust the sources of information that you use to make decisions in your lives. Now it's time for some good news. This week's good news comes out of England. They have developed a test there, a blood test, that is 99% accurate in detecting the presence of cancer. It looks in the blood for tiny fragments of genetic material floating in the blood and is able to predict whether those are cancerous or not. They did this study on 20,000 people and it was shown to be accurate 99% of the time. And it detects for lung cancer, gastrointestinal cancer, prostate, bladder, ovarian, breast, pancreatic, liver, all these different types of cancers. We have always been told that early detection gives us a much better chance for positive outcomes. So this isn't going to prevent cancer, but it gives us a much better chance of beating it. I think we all need access to that test.